All right. Looks like most people are here. I'll keep this up in case other people are going to join. So I hope everyone's been doing all right through all of this. I know this is difficult on all of us, but hopefully now we got some time to review here. Really today, what I want to focus on is what this AP exam is going to be all about. Um, and know that a lot of the AP world, not just AP government, obviously is in a little bit of a flux right now as College Board has done its best to create an exam that will be accessible to students, but at the same time, they've had to make some changes. And so I really want to focus on those changes, and I really want to focus on what this is going to be all about. So, the exam is going to is been moved as I mentioned on Google Classroom. Um, it is now going to be a week later than it originally is going to be, May 11th. It is obviously entirely online, and it's at 4 p.m. So for us, obviously, I think that I like that better than going early in the morning at 8 a.m. This is at first AP was like, hey, there's going to be two dates. This is really the date you need to take it. If you have any questions about that date for whatever reason, you would need to get in touch with me and your guidance counselor. But this is the date that everyone's going to take it, May the 11th at 4 p.m. And so, like I said, I like that a little bit better than the 8 a.m. So what's going to be on it? So we have two FRQ questions that are going to be on the test. We have the argumentative essay. You're going to get 25 minutes to do that. It's going to be worth 60% of your grade. And then the concept application is going to be worth 15. It's going to be 15 minutes. Going to be worth 40% of your grade. And then at the end, after all that, they're going to give you 5 minutes to upload. Now, the way you can take this exam is going to be up to you. I would suggest if you have a laptop, if you have a desktop, that's the way you do it. I think it's just the easiest, the least likely for something funky to happen. However, you can take this on your phone. All right. And again, I'm not going to sit here and necessarily recommend that's the way to go. But AP Board has definitely left that open as a possibility. Also, if you're not a great typer or you'd rather write this out, one of the other options AP Board has given you is that you can write it out and then take a picture and then upload those pictures to the AP exam and turn it in that way. All right. So obviously, it depends on what you're the most comfortable with. If it were me, I would definitely um, take this on a desktop or a laptop if I have that option. If you're someone for whatever reason that doesn't have reliable internet access, you need to find a way, obviously, during that exam to get that done. If you have questions, you can contact me and we can try to figure that out. What's going to be on it? So the first 3 units are going to be on it. So the first 2 units that we discussed last semester are foundations units. So that's your your road to the Constitution of the United States with your documents like the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, the actual Constitution, all the Federalist Papers, all that good stuff, and then federalism as well. That first unit. And then the second unit, which is the biggest unit, the branches of government, so your judicial, executive, legislative, and the bureaucracy, all that stuff's on there. And then this last unit that we just got done with before spring break, civil rights and civil liberties, is also going to be on it. There is nothing on unit 4 or 5. So those first 2 units we did this spring semester, this second semester, they're not putting on there because it's possible some people didn't get to them. And so from our standpoint, we're not gonna worry about that. We're just gonna worry about these first 3 right here. So the argumentative essay, I'm going to really go over that today. There's a guide that I'm going to show you, and then tomorrow I'll probably make a separate video that just highlights the argumentative essay. There's going to be 3 required docs on it, so you still need to know all 9. So that's something we're definitely going to start reviewing next week. The SCOTUS cases can be used as a second piece of evidence. The concept will have unit 1, 2, or 3. So basically what this all means is that you do still need to understand the 15 cases and the 9 foundational documents. That is still something that people will obviously need to know. This is an open note test. All right, so you can use your notes, you can use your textbook, but realize this is 45 minutes. So it's a timed exam. There's going to be pressure on you to use your time wisely. So I would not suggest necessarily going through your notes and searching through things unless you have those notes really organized and you know where things are at. So be prepared. There's going to be a couple of documents I'm going to be releasing over the next couple of weeks. That's going to be, try to have all the documents on 1, maybe 2 pages, and the same thing with the court cases. That way, you have something quick to look at if you need a refresher. But realize, because of the time of this exam, you're not really going to have time to sit through and search your notes and all that good stuff. Also, AP Board, when they announced all this stuff, all the teachers were listening in. They made it very clear that there's going to be anti-cheating, software or whatever they're going to use to make sure that people aren't cheating in any way. And if they find you cheating, also you get a 0 on the exam, and they're going to send that out to all the colleges that you cheated on this exam. So I would say don't do it. Use your notes. I mean, you could use your notes, use your textbook. You can use the internet, but again, realize that this is only 45 minutes. You got 25 and 15 for the questions. So be very time thorough when answering these questions. All right, so the argumentation essay. This is, and I'm going to attach this probably after this meeting, the new, I guess you want to call it the new scoring guide for the argumentation essay. So they made some changes in this. If you remember in the argumentative essays, this is where they give you the 3 documents, and then you got to have a thesis with a defensible claim and a line of reasoning. Then you got to use one of these documents, and then another piece of evidence. Then at the very end, they had you, present an alternative viewpoint. You either had to refute that, or you had to concede to that, or something like that. They got rid of that last point. You no longer have to present that alternative viewpoint and then either concede it or refute it or anything like that. So I guess that helps a little bit. So it used to be a 6-point essay. Now it's a 7-point essay. So let's kind of go through that. So the first point, and I posted a video on this yesterday, this is the most important point that you're going to have in the exam, is the thesis point, okay? Articulates a defensible claim or a thesis that responds to a question and establishes a line of reasoning, okay? So what's really important in our past argumentation essays is people did not have a discernible thesis, okay? You have to have a discernible thesis. That means I'm presenting, okay, here is my viewpoint and these are the reasons why, okay? In that video I pointed yesterday, I said that you really need to have 2 reasons in your line of reasoning, okay? One of those reasons has to connect to one of those 3 documents that are in the question. The other one can come from another one of those documents, or can come from something else in the class. So the thesis is going to connect to a lot of these other points. So if you don't have a thesis that establishes a defensible claim, meaning something that you're arguing, and then backs it up with a line of reasoning, which is basically you previewing your points that you're going to use in your body paragraphs. If you don't have this, it's going to be very difficult to earn some of these other points. All right, in the evidence, so you have to provide one piece of evidence that is relevant to the topic. Does not need a thesis on this point. So the only 2 points you can earn without a thesis basically are these points right here. And what that means is you have to provide a piece of evidence that's relevant to the prompt. So let's say the prompt is saying, should the government, should the Constitution make it easier to allow for amendments, okay? So you could provide, you could say, no, it doesn't. And you could, maybe use Article 5 of the Constitution and say, Article 5 allows for a convention of states, and the convention of states allows for the states to come together and propose amendments and then go through the state ratification process, okay? So that would be one example. Doesn't necessarily have to tie into your thesis. Obviously, if it does, that makes it better for your essay. And then you do the same thing. You provide 2 pieces, and again, you do not need a thesis for this point. So technically, you cannot write a thesis, and you can still get these 2 points right here. However, the rest of this, you have to have a thesis statement. And so obviously our goal, in my opinion, is to score at least a 4 out of 7, if not higher, if we want to pass this. And so obviously we want to have a thesis. And if you have these 2 points right here, which is basically you just providing an evidence saying Article 5 allows for, convention of states, which is very easy, then that would be simple. So, other pieces of evidence right here. So, uses one piece of evidence in a specific evidence to support the claim or thesis. The evidence may come from one of the foundational documents in the prompt or any other foundational document or knowledge of course concepts. So, what this means, so I've mentioned Article 5 Convention of the States, okay? That gets me to this point right here. Now right here, I have to basically detail, what does Article 5 say and how does that relate to my thesis statement? And then I do the same thing right here. This either does come from, one of the 3 documents or another piece of evidence. All right, and then lastly, the analysis and reasoning. This is where a lot of people are struggling. I think these are the hardest 2 points to earn right here. This is where you're going to explain how or why the evidence supports, your thesis. So you have to detail why does Article 5 make it easy enough to, amend the Constitution. You can talk about, previous amendments to the Constitution, or you can talk about why Article 5 makes it too difficult to amend the Constitution. You can talk about how we've not had an Article 5 Convention of States. But here you have to explain, okay? And so, 1 to 2 sentence answers is really not what's going to get it done. You need to make sure that people know what you're talking about by providing details and evidence. And last year when I taught Euro, I talked about you got to give me the meat. That means you got to give me specifics that I can point to. I don't want lettuce and tomatoes and things like that, which are just kind of toppings, which don't really add anything to the sandwich. You got to give me specifics and details, and that's what really comes in these B and C points. Do I have any questions so far? If you have questions, you can type them into the group chat. I want to make sure I'm not going too fast. Yeah, this one is only 25 minutes. Yeah, so that in terms of, you're going to read the prompt, you got to think about, okay, the first thing I'm going to do, what side am I choosing, okay? And then what document am I going to use out of the 3 documents that they give me? And then what's going to be my other piece of evidence? And then basically you have to get to work. And so that's why it's going to be really important to understand the documents. And that's why I'm going to provide you a piece of paper that you can print out. And that's why I think it'd also be smart to print out some of these things I give you the next couple of weeks. That way you can see, okay, Fed 51 deals with checks and balances. Because I know some of these Federalist papers we can get, can kind of get people all confused. So make sure you understand the documents, definitely. All right, so we already kind of went through that. So I'm going to just show you an example right here of how you would earn some of these points. So, and again, I'm not going to, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because I do want to get through some other stuff, and then I will talk about this more tomorrow. But how would you earn this point? So here's an example I borrowed from someone. Providing a piece of evidence that is relevant to the prompt. In the United States government, the Articles of Confederation, the national government was much weaker than the state governments, okay? So you can see right here, they're just mentioning in the first point what the Articles of Confederation are and what it did. All right, then the second piece of evidence right here, you're going to provide specific and relevant evidence that relates to your thesis statement. So right here, what you might say is because of this, the Articles of Confederation were very weak and were unable to do many things. One of the weakest points of the Articles of Confederation was the inability for the federal government to raise taxes, and so the states were given this ability. This was a detriment to the country as the national government was now unable to afford a standing army. Because of this, there's a massive Shays rebellion that it was unable to put down. So the reason why this gets the point, and you're going to see where my specifics come into, there are two specifics mentioned right here that explain why the Articles of Confederation relates to the prompt. Okay, the first thing they talk about the inability to raise taxes in the Articles of Confederation, and then they also talk about the fact that they didn't have a standing army, and that led to Shays' rebellion. So those are the two specific things I'm talking about that you got to have when you're writing this essay right here. Then lastly, this is the evidence part, and this is probably the most difficult part. The Articles of Confederation has strong reasoning that increased federal power is beneficial because the lack of one caused rebellions within the country that were unable to be put down due to a weak federal government and selfish states. If the Articles of Confederation strengthened the national government initially, Shays' rebellion would have been stopped and the Articles of Confederation would have been stronger. So right here, it's basically explaining, okay, this is why it's important to have a strong federal government. And it's not mentioning specifics, but it's now kind of putting points 1 and 2 together. And so then here in the third point, it's explaining, okay, this is why we need to have a strong government, because when we had the Articles of Confederation, it was too weak. We couldn't put down a rebellion, and obviously it was not very beneficial to the people. This right here is just an example of the second piece right here. I'm not going to go through this, but if you guys want to look at this as an example, and again, in the same thing, it's going to list a specific piece of evidence. In this case, it mentions the core case, Shaw versus Reno. It explains why Shaw versus Reno was instituted, and then it talks about why Shaw versus Reno advocates for a strong federal government. Let's skip that part right here. In the last point I talked about, it's really important to explain. How do you explain? You have to provide one of these 3 E's right here. So you either need to elaborate, and that's really what they did right here. They elaborated why the Articles of Confederation did not provide for a strong government, and why that was not a benefit to the people of the United States. Evidence, okay, you could provide specific pieces of evidence, or you could provide a hypothetical example. Any one of those. When you're talking about your last point right here, that is the important part. All right. Do I have any questions over the argumentation essay before I get into concept. All right, if anything comes up, I'll stop here and I'll answer. All right, the last one is the concept FRQ. Okay, this is worth 40%. You have 15 minutes. This is not really an essay, okay? The argumentation FRQ is more of an essay. I guess those of y'all that took either AP Euro or US, it's similar to the LEQ in a way. This is more of a it's simpler to like an SAQ in a way. You're just going to answer the question, okay? There's going to be an A, B, and a C. They're going to provide you some sort of hypothetical situation. And then you just have to answer the prompt. So there's no thesis statement necessarily. You don't need to have an introduction or anything like that. You're just answering the prompt, okay? So, you know, this is not really an essay. This is more of a short answer type question. You only have 15 minutes for it. So it's more of just answer the question, provide your evidence, and get right to it. I wanted to provide, this is the example from last year's AP Government Exam. So in last year's AP Government Exam, this was the FRQ, the concept FRQ that was used on the exam. So it's going to provide an example like it does right here. Since the 2008 Alliance Defending Freedom, a conservative Christian interest group, has promoted an annual event known as Pulpit Freedom Sunday. On this occasion, pastors encourage to challenge the provision of the tax law known as the Johnson Amendment, which prohibits political activity by certain nonprofit organizations, including religious organizations. While the Johnson Amendment does not restrict religious leaders from speaking out on social issues, it does prohibit them from contributing money to political campaigns or speaking out or in favor or against candidates running for office. On Pulpit Freedom Sunday, as an act of civil disobedience, pastors and religious leaders preach openly about moral qualifications of candidates seeking office, okay? So that's the hypothetical situation that it gives us. Then, now that it's given us the hypothetical situation, I have to look at the prompt right here. So, after reading a scenario, please respond to A, B, and C below. A, describe an action Congress could take to address the concerns of the interest group in this scenario. So, we know that the interest group is the Alliance for Defending Freedom. They're a conservative Christian interest group that is encouraging on this day that individuals, you know, violate the Johnson Amendment and talk about the moral qualifications for seeking office. So you have to describe what's something Congress could do to address the concerns of this interest group, okay? So obviously, what are things Congress can do? They can pass a law. They could make amendments to pieces of legislation. Okay. Now here's the thing. I can't say Congress could pass a law that addresses the concerns of the interest group. I have to be specific. What kind of law could Congress pass? So in the context of the scenario, explain how partisan divisions could prevent the action described in Part A. So I could use like a real life example right now, right? We have a Democratic House and we have a Republican Senate with a Republican president. So it might be difficult, right, to pass this right now. The fact that we have a split Congress, and that it would be very difficult to pass something that would allow for, you know, an exemption to the Johnson Amendment, or that would allow for pastors to do this, you know, on Pulpit Freedom Sunday. And then lastly, explain why the Alliance Defending Freedom might argue their constitutional rights are threatened by the Johnson Amendment. So here, I can't just say the Alliance for Defending Freedom may argue their First Amendment rights are threatened by the Johnson Amendment, okay? That might be right, that you could argue that. However, you have to be specific. So you could argue, say, the Alliance for Defending Freedom might argue that their free exercise of religion is threatened by the Johnson Amendment. And then I need to explain why, okay? I could provide a court case to back me up. I could provide an illustrative scenario to back me up. But I have to do something. I have to answer the question and then back me up with some evidence to answer this. So like I said, in this scenario, you're just answering the questions It's, there's no essay format. You're just going straight at it, A, B, and C in these scenarios. So here's an example right here for part A of this question. Describe an action Congress could take to address the concerns of the interest group. Due to the harm of interest groups acting out civil disobedience, which can be very harmful to the public, Congress can ask for the interest group to peacefully voice their concerns to Congress. Congress can accommodate for a need to pass laws to address the concerns of the interest group that relate to their goal or policy agendas, such as religion in this case. Okay, so where they got the point is highlighted in yellow right here. Congress can accommodate for their needs and pass a law to address the concerns of the interest group that relate to their goal or policy agenda, such as in this case is religion. Okay, so this is where they got point A right here. Point B, you could explain how partisan divisions could prevent this from happening. Obviously, this is more of a conservative or Republican plan. Democrats would obviously not agree to this for the most part, as much more as conservative Republicans would. And so, as you can see right here, the yellow again is how they got this. They explained how this plan would create partisan divisions and how it could make it difficult to get something passed in A. And again, lastly, in Part C, the Alliance for Defending Freedom can argue that the First Amendment rights are threatened by the Johnson Amendment. This is because religious leaders or organizations cannot publicly support a candidate, therefore it limits their free speech. Also, government cannot limit free speech unless it is a clear and present danger, which is not present in this case. So if you remember, clear and present danger comes from Schneck versus the United States. So even though they didn't specifically mention the case, presenting the fact that this clear and present danger case, which has been established by the Supreme Court, was not threatened by the fact that these preachers are violating the Johnson Amendment. They can make an argument. They use the free speech clause in this example that their free speech was being hindered right here. Do I have any questions right here on the argument or on the concept FRQ? Like I said, I'm going to spend a day Thursday going over argumentation and then Friday going over concept. So if I went over that too quickly, I'll spend each a day Thursday and Friday going over each one of those. All right, and then lastly, here is kind of our plan ahead, okay? So obviously right now, all we know is that we're continuing our online classes through May 1st. My guess is that's going to be extended. I'm very doubtful that we're going to be in class the rest of the year. So I'm planning on all of this being online. So next week, we're going to review Unit 1. So I'm going to provide you kind of a unit review sheet, and then I'm going to post several videos that will kind of explain this stuff, and you'll be able to fill out that review sheet. We'll also do a practice argumentation FRQ at the end of the week. The second week, the week of April 27th, we'll review Unit 2. We'll practice another argumentation FRQ. And then we'll have a quiz over the core documents. I want you to understand these core documents because you're going to have to know them for the argumentation FRQ. I'd hate for you to make a simple mistake referring to a wrong Federalist paper or getting confused on what an author was saying. So that's why I want you to really understand this because you're going to have to know it for the first FRQ. And then lastly, again, right now it's not scheduled as an online week, but I'm pretty sure it will be. Review our last unit. We'll do a concept practice at the end of the week, and we'll also have a quiz over our 15 Supreme Court cases. Again, the test is May 11th at 4 p.m. My plan is on that day at 1 p.m. to basically allow you all to ask me questions, have kind of more an open Zoom review instead of me just talking the entire time, and to take questions that you all have and give you some time to get prepared, and then you'll have the exam at 4 p.m. And then really after that point, we'll pretty much be done. You know, so that's basically all I have right now. Do I have any questions right now from anyone? I've given you the opportunity. If you want to speak up, you can. But does anyone have any questions over anything I've talked about today, or just anything with the class in general?
High waters.
Anyone? Any questions?
Same feeling I get and that's when I see my check and my PayPal goes ding ding. I'm like, what? She buys out of PayPal where James can't see it. We know my PayPal. People that want to close that.
The other day I had to return some stuff, so I got $46 back.
All right. Well, all right. I think some people don't know that I need it every week. So if I don't have any questions, I'll stop there. If you got any questions, you can let me know. Otherwise, stay safe. I'll see you all again soon, hopefully.
Good job, Mr. Waters.
Hey, Dad bought a gift card.
You didn't have change, so she charged you $30 for it.
So I gave that $50.
It's just letting that for